Hi biologists, let's start by looking at the learning objectives for this lesson. At the end of this section and following the biology syllabus, you should be able to describe the basic structure of bacterial cells and describe the three main types of bacteria. What does this actually mean? What are we trying to understand? This is very straightforward. All you have to be able to do is to be able to draw and describe the basic structure of a bacterial cell and know the three main types of bacteria. Before we look at bacterial cell structure, let's remind ourselves of what we've already learned about prokaryotic cells. We've learned that prokaryotic cells do not have a membrane-bound true nucleus. They have no membrane around their nucleus. They don't have membrane-bound organelles either, like mitochondria and chloroplasts. This was a very important definition that we had to learn and understand. So basically, in a nutshell, prokaryotic cells are very primitive, they don't have a proper nucleus, and they don't have organelles, cell structures like mitochondria and chloroplasts. We also learned that bacteria cells are the only prokaryotic cells that exist. We also looked at the characteristics or features of prokaryotic cells. First of all, prokaryotic cells are single-celled or unicellular, uni referring to the idea of a unit or one. Then we learned that they are small, primitive cells, P for primitive, P for prokaryotic. Prokaryotic cells are usually bacteria cells. Prokaryotic cells have no true nucleus. They just have a loop of chromosomal DNA in their cytoplasm. They have no mitochondria or chloroplasts. So now, if we're going to study the general structure of bacteria cells, then we should see a repeat of these characteristics. Bacteria cells are unicellular. They are one cell big, and as we've said already, uni referring to the idea of a unit or one. We saw this in our checklist of prokaryotic cells, where we have said that prokaryotic cells are single-celled. Bacteria cells are prokaryotic. As we've said, they are primitive cells, they have no membrane bound, they have no proper nucleus, they don't have membrane bound organelles like mitochondria and chloroplasts. Again, reflecting a characteristic of prokaryotic cells that we met already. Lastly, bacteria cells are so small they are measured in special units called micrometers. A micrometer is 1,000th of a millimeter, or the smallest measurement on your ruler. This again is reflected in the properties of prokaryotic cells because, as we've already said, prokaryotic cells are small, primitive cells. Now that we are very clear on the fact that bacterial cells are prokaryotic cells, let's look at the structure of a bacterial cell in a little bit more detail. When I am drawing the structure of a bacterial cell, I like to imagine that I am drawing a slimy tic-tac shape. I would advise you to draw the bacteria cell following the same procedure or method as shown here. don't forget to practice in a jotter. The slimy layer is a capsule, which is a protective layer. Bacteria cells also have a cell wall and a cell membrane and are filled with cytoplasm. They have a loop of chromosomal DNA suspended in the cytoplasm. They also could have plasmids, which is another type of DNA important in conferring antibiotic resistance. Some bacteria have storage granules and will also have ribosomes for protein synthesis. Some bacteria have flagella. Flagellum is singular to allow movement, and for people who are able for a bit more, let's include a mesosome. Mesosomes carry out respiration. Don't forget, bacteria lack mitochondria, which normally carry out respiration for cells. So let's go down through each part. Now, bacteria cells always have cell walls. The cell wall stops the bacterial cell from expanding and bursting. The cell wall is made from a material called peptidoglycan for people able for a bit more. And of course, this is very different from the cell wall of a plant cell, which is made of cellulose, and the cell wall of a fungus, which is made from chitin. The cell membrane controls what enters and leaves the cell. It is semi-permeable. The cytoplasm, or watery jelly, supports or holds the internal cell structures. This is where the ribosomes can be found. Chromosomal DNA contains genes that control the cell. And don't forget, there's no true nucleus here. The cells are prokaryotic, so there's no nuclear membrane. The function of the ribosomes is to make protein. Now, don't forget, when we are discussing the functions of cell parts, or anything for that matter, we have to use an action word. We have to use a verb. The cell wall stops the cell from expanding. The cell membrane controls what enters and leaves. The cytoplasm supports. The DNA contains. The ribosomes make protein. These are all action words. These are all verbs and have to be used when you are giving the function of a cell part, as we've just said. Bacterial cells sometimes have storage granules, which obviously store food. The food can be stored in the form of glycogen, which we met before. Glycogen is a storage polysaccharide in animals. It is found in the liver and brain cells. Here, the storage granules store glycogen. Bacterial cells can also have plasmids. The plasmids contain genes that control or govern resistance to antibiotics. Plasmids have been used in genetic engineering. Flagella allow movement. The capsule, as we've said, is a slime layer which prevents drying out and protects the bacteria from the human immune system. And again, note, all these functions contain action words. Stores food, contains genes, allows movement, prevents drying out. Lastly, bacteria are classified into 3 different groups according to their shape. The first group are round bacteria or cocci bacteria. These bacteria can exist as single cells, or they can exist in the form of a chain. As a matter of interest, streptococci are the bacteria that cause sore throats, hence a strep throat. The second type of bacterial cell are rod shape. These are the more tic-tac shaped bacterial cells. An example of a rod-shaped bacteria is E. coli, which can cause food poisoning. Lastly, the third group of bacteria are the spiral bacteria. These have a spiral shape and are found in Helicobacter pylori, which is found in the stomach and intestines of humans. And there you have it. Practice in a jotter. It's infectious. Now that we have reached the end of our lesson, have we achieved our objective? Can you describe the basic structure of bacterial cells and describe the three main types of bacteria?